So good day. Today, we'll be discussing Chapter 1, Lesson 12, Questionnaire and Instrument. Some of you have already and familiar on how to develop your questionnaire or data gathering instrument. Constructing and refining the measurement question. Drafting or selecting question begins once you develop a complete list of investigative question or objective or statement of the problem and decide on the collection process to be used, or this is referring to your Chapter 3, the methodology. The creation of questionnaire is not haphazard or arbitrary process. It is exacting and requiring paying significant attention to details and simultaneously addressing numerous issues. So sometimes your questionnaire, if you have initial draft of your questionnaire, there are some times that you need to omit some of the details in order to have a suitable impact on the respondents. And there are also some need paraphrasing. You need to shorten some of the statements to make it more appealing to your respondents. Whether you create or borrow or license a question, you generate specific questions considering subject content, the wording of each question, and response strategy. The order, type, and wording of the measurement question, the introduction, the instructions, and the closure in a quality questionnaire should accomplish the following. So your questionnaire, you will have to use these guidelines or criteria as your guide for your questionnaire making or construction. Encourage each participant to provide accurate response. This is true when you wanted that your respondents, if you wanted your respondents to have an accurate answer on your questions, make sure that your statement were constructed properly and clearly. Encourage each participant to provide an adequate amount of information. Since some of the participants, it is a hassle for their end, so therefore, make sure that you will have the appropriate questions that is intended to answer your study or objectives. Discourage each participant from refusing to answer a specific question. So you need to motivate, encourage to solicit the required answers that you are or that you need for your study. Leave the participants with a positive about the survey participation. So you need to enlighten your respondents that their information, the answering of your survey will be a good contribution to the knowledge and for the betterment of community. Question categories and structure. Questionnaires and interview schedule can ranges from those that have a great deal of structure to those that are essentially unstructured. Questionnaire contains 3 categories of measurement questions. First, we have administrative questions. Second, classification questions. And third, the target question, the structure or unstructured. So what are these administrative questions? Administrative question identify the participant, interviewer location, and condition. These questions are rarely asked of the participants but are necessary for studying pattern within the data and identify possible error or sources. Classification questions usually covers sociological demographic variable that allows participants to answer to be grouped so that patterns are revealed and can be studied. In administrative questions, there are sometimes researchers that they need to know the background of their interviewer or interviewees in order for them to craft the questionnaire appropriately. If the respondents, you are planning to have a respondents that are busy, so make sure that your questions are short enough, brief, and precise. In terms of classification questions, all you have to do is you have to group your respondents, based on their demographics. Target questions address the investigative question of a specific study. These are grouped by topic in the survey. So if you have clientele satisfaction, so you have to use para Suraman et al. Dimension, service quality dimension. Target questions may be structured. They present the participants with a fixed set of choices, often called closed question or unstructured. They do not limit responses but do provide a frame of reference for the participants' awareness, sometimes referred to as open-ended question. So what are the question content? Question content is first and foremost dictated by the investigative questions guiding the study. From this questionnaire designer craft or borrow the target and classification question that will be asked of participants. For questions covering numerous issues, guide the instrument designer in selecting appropriate question content. So these are the guidelines. A. Should this question be asked? Does it match the study objective? B. Is the question of proper scope and coverage? Because there are sometimes questions in the questionnaire that are not necessary, especially when you do the validity inappropriately. C. Can the participants adequately answer this question as asked? So you need to consider if they do understand English language or English writings. So if not, then you need to translate that in their mother tongue. D. Will the participants willingly answer the question as asked? So if too long, the questions are too long, then sometimes it is a discouragement for the end of respondents. So issue category and the fundamental issues. Purposeful versus interesting. So what are the issue? Thus the question asks for the data that will be merely interesting or truly useful in making a decision. So sometimes it is short, but it is interesting, but it will not serve the purpose of the study. Incomplete or unfocused. Will the question reveal what the decision maker needs to know? So this is the issue of there are some not too intentional, so make sure that your question is structured as neutral as possible. So double-barreled question, or this is a two-way or double meaning statements. Thus, the question asks the participants for too much information. Would the desired single response be accurate for all parts of the question? Sometimes, when we draft the questionnaire, sometimes the first question is synonymous with other questions. So, it's somewhat related, but it's okay if it is related, but not it is up to the extent na it is synonymous. Precision, thus the question asks precisely what the decision maker needs to know or the researcher needs to know. Is it suitable? Does the question answer the objectives of the study? So that is the issue. Fifth, time for thought. It is reasonable to assume that the participants can frame an answer to the question. Thus, you give enough time for the respondents to answer the question. Did you give the respondents enough time to think accurately in responding to your question? So that is the issue category. 6, participants at the expense of accuracy. Thus, the question pressured the participants for a response regardless of knowledge or experience. So, presumed knowledge. Thus, the question assumed that the participants has the knowledge he or she may not have. So, make sure that your respondents are properly oriented so that you can extract your information needed. Recall the memory decay. Thus, the question asks the participants for information that relates to thoughts or activity too far in the participants' past to be remembered. So, that is one of the issue. Balance. Thus, the question asks the participants to generalize or summarize behavior that may have no discernible pattern. So, that is part of your questionnaire construction. Objectivity. Does the question omit or include information that will bias the participant's response? It is too suggestive or too vague that the respondents are confused to answer your question. Sensitive information. Does the questions ask the participants to reveal embarrassing, shameful, or ego-related information? So sometimes your respondents will be hesitant if you are soliciting too much sensitive information, unless you and the respondents agree with the certain conditions on how to deal with this information. 12. Shared vocabulary. Thus, the question use words that have no meaning of a different meaning for participants. Make sure that the respondents will have that the language used by the researcher are the same with the language used by the respondents. Unsupported assumption. Thus, the question assumed a prior experience, a precondition, or prior knowledge that the participants does not that or may not have. So, when dealing with the respondents, make sure as administrative questions you need to have at least a background of your respondents. Frame of reference. Is the question worded from the participants rather than the researcher's perspective? Sometimes the researchers are more intellectual than respondents. So make sure that you are crafting your questionnaire on the respondent's perspective in order not to give confusion to your respondents. Bias wordings. Thus, the question contains wording that implies the researcher desire for the participants to respond in one way versus another. So, as what I have said, make sure that your questionnaires or statements are not too suggestive. Personalized versus projection. It is necessary for the participants to reveal personal attitudes and behavior, or may the participants project these attitudes and behavior to some like him or her. Adequate alternatives. Thus, the question provides a mutually exhaustive list of alternatives to encompass realistic or likely participants' attitude and behavior. So sometimes too much option is not good. No. It will take time for the respondents. Response strategy choice. Objective of the study is the question designed to classify or label attitude, condition, or behavior, or reveal them. Level of information. Does the participants possess the level of information appropriate for participation in the study? So, in the selection process of respondents, make sure to have appropriate selection of respondents. Thoroughness of prior thoughts. Has the participants developed an attitude on the issue being asked? Communication skills. Does the participants have sufficient command of the language to answer the question? Participation motivation. Is the level of motivation sufficient to encourage the participants to give thoughtful, revealing answer? Now, in question wording, it is frustrating when people misunderstand a question that has been painstakingly written. This problem is partially due to the lack of shared vocabulary, especially when you fail to orient your respondents. The difficulty of understanding long and complex sentences or involved phraseology aggravate the problem further. Although it is impossible to say which wording of a question is best, we can point out several areas that cause participants confusion and measurement error. The diligent question designer will be put a survey question through many revision before it satisfies this criteria. So that's why you have validity, content validity, and other validities. Is the question stated in terms of a shared vocabulary? In the perspective of respondents, not on the perspective of the researcher. Does the question contain vocabulary with a single meaning, or does it have a double meaning? Does the question contain unsupported or misleading assumptions? Does the question contain biased wording? Or is the question correctly personalized? Are adequate alternatives presented within the question? Sometimes if you researcher are not sure with the options, then make sure to have option of others or other option. Response strategy. A third major decision area in question design is the degree and form of structure imposed on the participant. The various response strategy offers option that includes unstructured response, open-ended response, or the free choice of words. The structured response or closed response specified alternative provided. In unstructured response, the respondents are free to give their ideas. And on the structured, you have given the respondents the options. Free response, in turn, range from those in which the participants express themselves extensively to those in which participants' latitude are restricted by space, layout, or instruction to choose one word or phrase as in a fill-in question. Closed response typically are categorized as dichotomous, multiple choice, checklist, rating, or ranking response strategy. Several situation factors affect the decision whether to use open-ended question or closed question, depending on the design of your study and the objective of your study. The decision is also affected by the degree to which these factors are known to the interviewer. The factors are the objective of the study, is it suitable, it can answer the statement of the problem or objective of the study, the participants' level of information about the topic, degree to which participants have thought through the topic, or it has the ease with which the participants communicate, or the participants' motivation level to share the information. So in drafting and refining the instrument participants, screening and introduction, the introduction must supply the sample unit with the motivation to participate in the study. In research and drafting your questionnaire, it must have the instruction and also the open letter or the letter to the respondents, explaining how important their time and effort in answering the question. So it must reveal enough about the forthcoming questions, usually by revealing some or all of the topics to be covered, for participants to judge their interest level and their ability to provide the desired information. In any communication study or survey study, the introduction also reveals the amount of time participation is likely to take. So there are sometimes introduction. We are conducting a study with the third year student of CPSU is conducting a study on the academic performance of student in relation a social media usage in relation to their academic performance. This will take only a few minutes of your time. So sometimes now the time is indicated on the letter. In personal or phone interviews as well as in email and web survey, the introduction usually contains one or more screen questions or filtered question to determine if the potential participants has the knowledge or experience necessary to participate in the study. So some of the researches is they have the pre-validation or the criteria before qualifying a certain respondents. At a minimum, a phone number or personal interview will provide his or her first name to help establish critical rapport with the potential participants. Measurement question sequencing. The design of survey questions is influenced by the need to relate each question to the other in the instrument. Often the content of one question called branch question assume other questions have been asked and answered. The psychological order of the question is also important. Question sequence can encourage and discourage commitment and promote or hinder the development of researcher-participant rapport. So it's very important to motivate the respondents to do and answer the survey. The basic principle used to guide sequence decision is this. The nature and need of the participants must determine the sequence of the question and the organization of the interview schedule. For guidelines are suggested to implement this principle. Number 1, The question process must quickly awaken interest and motivate the participants to participate in the interview. Put the more interesting topical target question early. Leave the classification question not used as filter or screen to the end of the survey. The participants should not be confronted by early requests for information that might be considered personal or ego-threatening. Put questions that might influence the participants to discontinue the questioning process near the end. The questioning process should begin with simple items and then move to a more complex, as well as move from general items to the more specific. Put taxing and challenging questions later in the question process. So it's very important also when you conduct the survey that you are around with the respondents. In order for the respondents, if they have some confusion or questions, then you can enlighten them with the answers, or give clarification and enlightenment on the question. Change in the frame of references should be small and should be clearly pointed out. Use transition statement between different topics of the target question set. So on how to awaken interest and motivation. We awaken interest and stimulate motivation to participate by choosing or designing questions that are attention-getting and not controversial. If the question have human interest value, so much better. If it is possible that the earlier question will contribute to valuable data to the major study objective, but their major task is to overcome the motivational barrier. Make it simple and brief. Most participants have limited time to answer your questions have limited interest in answering the question. So make your question as brief as possible but not compromising the quality of statement. Instruction. The researcher must have its instruction on how to use the questionnaire by the participants. This instruction must be clear and precise to avoid confusion. How to overcome instrument problems. There is no substitute for a thorough understanding of question wording, question content, and question sequencing issues. However, the researcher can do several things to help improve survey result among them. Build rapport with the participants. Redesign the questioning process. Explore alternative response strategy. Use methods other than surveying to secure the data. Pre-test all the survey element. So, this is the importance of doing the validity testing. So, thank you very much.